Aloha, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here on Spotlight Hawaii. It is 10:30 this Wednesday morning. I'm Yenji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalei-Suji. And Ryan, today we have a guest that we have been wanting to speak to for some time about something that a lot of people in this town have opinions about.
That's right. We have been actively for the past few months trying to get someone on from HART and to discuss the rail. We know that it is an issue that many people have brought up over the course of the year that we've been doing this show. We've seen it in the comments, even during our conversations about COVID. There seems to always be people talking and asking about rail. And so joining us this morning, we are so glad that Lori Kahikina, the interim CEO of HART, is able to join us this morning. Good morning, Lori. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Let's start off really on the macro level, on the broad level. Where are we at with this rail project right now? If you can give us an update on the project as a whole and what we're looking at right now.
Sure. So the full HART program project, it's 20 miles and 21 stations. And so to date, majority actually has been done. About 3/4 of it is done. And what they've accomplished so far, it's actually pretty impressive. I actually got to go out on and ride one of the cars, and it is impressive what they've accomplished so far. But what is remaining is the last 4 miles and 8 stations to Ala Moana.
And there's so much to those last few miles. Can you tell us, as an outsider coming in, you've been on the job two months now, sort of on that macro level, just coming in and with a fresh perspective, what are the most surprising things that you've found about the way this project has been run?
I do see quite a bit of redundancies and inefficiencies. Back when I was at Department of Environmental Services, the wastewater and solid waste program there is actually pretty massive too. It's about a $5 billion project over there, multiple projects. But what I've noticed here is there's layers upon layers of whether it's consultants, staff, and the way we procure things with the contractors, it's not the most efficient way. So that's the most surprising thing I found here.
And so what have you done? And I know it's only been 2 months, but what have you done, or what would you like to do to solve some of those issues and see that those inefficiencies don't continue on?
So we have started to release some staff here at HART. It actually started on my first day here, and we're continuing to do that. We are hoping to have all decisions made by the end of the month, and that includes HART staff, so that's city staff and consultants and contractors. So like I said, we seem to have multiple layers of consultants, contractors, and our own staff doing review upon review. So we've already cut some of our own staff, we've cut some of the high-paid consultants, and that very expensive contract down Dillingham, that was a $400 million contract, and it ballooned up to $650 million. So I did stop that. I'm not saying that's a cost savings, because the monies that are still in the bank is going to be needed for the utility relocations. But the way we contracted that project was not the correct vehicle to use.
Let's talk a little bit about the money, because when we talk about rail, the figures are really astonishing. Just recently, of course, the COVID relief is coming through, and it looks like there's $70 million that is allocated to rail. That really just offsets the money that rail has lost because of reduced tax revenue thanks to COVID. So where are we in terms of funding? Is this project going to be able to be finished financially? And if not, where is that money going to come from?
Wow, very tough questions. So we are in the process right now of updating our what the FTA refers to as an EAC, estimate at completion. And we just finished it late last week, but we're still vetting it internally to make sure it's a realistic number. And then we would like to share it with the FTA, our board, the city, our stakeholders. But what we're looking at is about a $3 billion shortfall. It's not all due to COVID. COVID is a factor, but the majority is the increase in costs, in construction costs, and how we do things. So there's a huge gap that we need to fill. I can't say I know all the answers, but there are some things that we're doing. We're hoping with, as the economy bounces back, the GET and TAT, we can go back up to where we were prior to COVID. We are hoping to look for additional funding from the federal government, other opportunities. So that 70 million was a surprise, but very, very grateful to Shots especially and the rest of our congressional leaders. They have been so supportive. And not to sound ungrateful, because 70 million sounds so manini compared to the $3 billion shortfall, but anything we can do is critical that we can get funds from. So we're trying to look for other opportunities there. We're trying to see how it can be more cost effective on how we're doing the last 4 miles and 8 stations. I mentioned that utility relocation contract down Dillingham, it wasn't the most prudent way to do things. We are also looking at what we call the Mauka Shift. So right now, the guideway is supposed to go down the center of Dillingham. And on 2 sides, on the Mauka side and Mackay side, there's 2 138 kV HECO lines. HECO needs about 50 feet distance between their line and the guideway for operational and maintenance purposes. So by going down the center, both 138 lines need to be undergrounded. And we're trying to, well, we did make the decision. We're going to move the guideway to the Mauka side of Dillingham. What that does is we can leave the Mackay side, the 138 kV on the Mackay side up. We don't have to underground it, and we're going to underground just the Mauka side. And we won't have to do as much utility relocations down that Dillingham corridor. So we're hoping that's some cost savings. That's not the silver bullet, because it does take additional rights of way. So we are in talks with both UH and Kamehameha Schools to see if there's a way we can partner. We are looking at our risk factors. When the P3 went out, and we're still looking at the results we're still getting documents from the 2 P3 bidders. They were at over $1 billion what HART has budgeted. I think HART budgeted about 1.4 billion. The bids came in way over 2 billion. And a majority, or I should say a large amount of that number, 500 million, was to risk, because they didn't know when they could actually get shoveled to ground in Dillingham. So if we can eliminate some of that risk, hopefully the bid prices can come down. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to streamline ourselves internally. Our operating cost is about $12 million a month. And I know it doesn't sound like much compared to 2 billion, but if we can tighten ourselves, you know what, like I said, we're streamlining our own staff, our consultants and contractors, to show our stakeholders, including the public, that I can't possibly ask for additional funds if we're not being prudent ourselves internally. And then one more thing that we're trying to pursue is think out of the box. We're talking to developers, and like I said, Kamehameha Schools, is there a way to partner? Can they kick in some private funds to help us? I don't think UH can, because they're in the same dilemma as us at the city, but are there private funds that can help, that they can donate to maybe a station or parts of the station? So those are some of the things we're doing to try and close that $3 billion gap.
And so we're looking at Dillingham and this shift that's going Mauka, realizing that there's going to need to be a lot of infrastructure work even before construction can begin on some of the columns and the actual rail guideways that go down there. What does that timeline look like? Because I imagine just making that shift of those utility lines that you spoke of could take some time to do. And so it may be a while before even construction begins on the rail component of it.
Absolutely. At the risk of being shot by the public and other stakeholders, we are actually estimating maybe 2031 that everything is complete. Construction, I'm hoping to start for the utility relocation, to try and put out a contract before the end of the year. Like I mentioned earlier, we stopped that contract that we had currently going down Dillingham. Like I said, it was a very inefficient way to do that type of contract. So we're working with our designers on areas 2 through 6, and that's from Iwilei to Ala Moana. They're almost done with the 100% designs. They're committing to get them done by May, and I am already asking the cabinet members with the city and mayor, please, I'm begging you, can we work together to expedite the permitting, and other stakeholders, whether it's Oceanic and HECO, can you please help us get these permits expedited so we can put a contract out before the end of the year. And this will just be for the utility relocations from Iwilei to Ala Moana. For the other part, the guideway and stations, we're looking not until next year to put out a procurement.
2031 is an awfully long way away. You'll have to forgive my ignorance on just the mechanics of how this works. That does not mean that we can't foresee riding the rail in some form by 2031. When do you estimate, because you said you yourself was able to take a train, and I know that that's just a test ride, so to speak.
Yes.
When do you think that the part that is built can start to be utilized?
So that's a good question. HART's goal is to have everything done to the stadium before the end of the year. That includes everything buttoned up on the fixed facilities and the core systems, the train, and hand it over to the city before the end of the year. Now, it's the city's decision on when to open with the mayor and Department of Transportation Services. So even if HART hands it over, they make the decision on when to do a partial opening. And I believe Mayor Blangiardi, in an interview a couple of weeks ago, voiced his concerns about opening to the stadium, especially at the state that the stadium is at right now. Would it be prudent to open up at the stadium? He doesn't want to get criticized on opening up a train to nowhere, but HART is giving information, DTS is giving information, because there are repercussions whether you open or not. There are costs involved. There are operating costs whether you open or not, electricity. So staffing, Hitachi, who is our operating partner, they've staffed up and they're training people to be ready to run this. But if we decide not to open it before the end of the year, Hitachi runs a risk of losing their trained staff. Certifications will have to be redone. So all of this information has been shared with Mayor, but that is completely his decision to make. But HART's goal is to get it over to city before the end of the year.
And we also know that there is developments and work happening right now at the airport. What can you tell us about that area right now? Because I imagine that could also be another important milestone to finish in that area, so that people on the west side of the island have access to the airport in a convenient fashion. What can you tell us about the work that's happening now in that area?
That's a very good question. And Mayor asked that of us. Okay, the station, we're supposed to terminate at the stadium for now. And he asked, what is it going to take to get the next two stations, Pearl Harbor and Airport? Pearl Harbor has quite a bit of employees there. So maybe can we get there? Can we get to the airport? Because, as tourism starts to kick up, or the employees working there too. So we asked our staff, when can we possibly get it over? And we can't get up those two stations till maybe 2023. And so it wasn't worth it to the mayor to, he has to put that into his equation. Do we open up just to the airport, or that? So we thought we could save 6 months by going up to the airport, but we are supposed to get it over to the city by the end of 2023 up to Middle Street. So we really weren't saving much time for him to stop at the airport, add those other two stations. So he said, okay, I think it's all or nothing, go all the way to Middle Street for the next phase. So we have construction ongoing there right now at the airport and at Middle Street.
I mean, you mentioned that Hitachi and others, it's a sunk cost, basically, that they've put all this in. What's your view? Do you think that the train should start to run? I know that the decision does lie with the mayor, but, since you're in there and you've actually had an opportunity, unlike so many of us, to ride the train, do you think there is utility in opening it, even if it is going to the stadium, which is not really functional right now?
Well, there's opportunities. I openly admit I don't have rail experience. And to be honest, I wasn't a rail supporter. I was a cabinet member under Peter Carlisle, and working at ENVs, or actually at the time, Department of Design and Construction. And he was asking the cabinet members, we need you folks to be champions for this project. Ignorance, I raised my hand. Why? I live on the windward side. Why should I support this? And he said, Lori, on the windward side, you had Cal Highway, Pali, and Likelike, and H3. All of those are federally funded. So you got yours already. Understand the people that are living on the west. And when I transferred to ENV and I started working out at Kapolei, it is horrendous. But these people have to deal with early in the morning, late at night, dealing with that traffic. They're waking up their children early in the morning to get them to work, to school, to grandma's house. It's not right. There has to be a better way. And so when I came over to Hart, of course, even prior, I mean, when Mayor said that to me, it definitely changed my view. And of course, seeing what everyone has had to deal with on the leeward side, this is something that needs to be done. And I think there's some utility if you open up Hart Way. When I got to ride on that train a few weeks ago, it just invigorates you. It's so impressive. So if we could get the public to ride, even if it's on the weekends or something, that okay, let's get the family, get on there, go to stadium, and then maybe go to the flea market. It starts to, this is real, and this is exciting, and something that you need to support all the way to Ala Moana Center, and maybe even further to UH or Mililani, out more on the leeward side. So there's some utility, but again, it's Mayor's decision.
When you look at just how long it's taken, right? So we're 10 years plus into this whole project since discussions have begun, and construction has happened. There is some talk that by the time this gets finished, the technology will be so far advanced that this may be outdated before it even begins running. Are you seeing any operational issues right now with some of the parts that you're dealing with? I mean, this is a train that can move into some regards on the west side that's already been done. But what are some of the challenges on the technical side that you may see moving forward as this continues to get delayed?
That's a fair concern, but we're out of the starting gate already. I don't think you can change technology. When I first started, I did ask staff, and it was in a board meeting. I'm open to any out-of-the-box ideas. So some people have, from the public, shared, this is what other agencies are doing. Maybe this is something you can look at. So I asked staff, is this possible? They said, we are too far down the road. We can't change directions at this point. So I think that ship has sailed, and I guess that's with any major construction. We have the same concerns on the wastewater side. When you're building massive infrastructure, technology may change, but you've committed. You need to go. And the other thing that we need to worry about is the funding. How are we going to fund this project? We can't let out contracts unless we have certain funds in place. That's why the 70 million is critical. We cannot let out a contract unless we can certify we have enough funds to pay the contractor up to a certain point. So even if, let's say, we get all of our designs done, all of our permits done by the end of this year, we have to phase out how we're putting out the contracts because we don't have the funding in place to put out a massive contract right now. So there's a lot of moving parts going on right now, a lot of challenges.
One of the big issues that came up with the mayoral race, there was this conversation of, do the candidates support ending at Middle Street? Do they support going to Ala Moana? From the planning perspective, where are you on that? I mean, I'm from the conversation we've had so far, my understanding is that you are planning beyond Middle Street, but what does that actually look like? And what kind of things happen if we don't go beyond Middle Street?
Yes, there was a lot of feedback for that. When I asked for out of the box, a lot of the feedback from the public is just kill it at Middle Street. There's a couple of problems with that. It's also a train to nowhere. People are trying to get to work in downtown or Waikiki. So by getting it to Ala Moana, that is the main hub on the island, the transfer station of the, between the rail and the bus and multimodal. So we have to get to Ala Moana. And the second thing is our full funding grant agreement with the FTA, it takes it to Ala Moana. We run the risk, if we stop at Middle Street, we run the risk of not getting any additional federal funds and the possibility of returning the funds that they've already given us, which is, I think, about $800 million. So I think it's the right thing to do. Where we're at is, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to do the utility relocations. Hopefully a contract before the end of the year can be let out. We would like the designs done for the rest of the utility relocation, which is where that Mauka Shift I was talking about, early next year. And next year, get out of procurement to do the guideway and the stations. So we have to make it. We have to make it to Ala Moana.
We've seen the, HART set up other programs beyond just the rail infrastructure, but programs to support the businesses that have been impacted by this. Programs such as the Shop and Dine program that was rolled out to help those businesses that are along the construction rail lines. And as you talk about moving into Dillingham, coming into the urban core, more businesses and individuals along that route will likely be impacted. What are you hearing from those businesses? How have they been impacted? Have these programs helped them? And moving forward, how are you going to be able to provide support to some of these businesses that will continue to be impacted by this project?
The feedback is many of them are adversely impacted, whether we're blocking the driveway or just the view to how to get into their businesses. So we have to help them. And so that Shop and Dine, honestly, as part of the cuts, the public information group, we did do some cuts over there, but this is the one thing that our staff felt this is so critical. How do we help those businesses there? And whether it's the signage, how to access, get into or sending out publications on, hey, we're still open. Make sure you come and visit these businesses. So we are committed to helping those along the line.
Sorry, I muted myself. There's a question here from Ingrid Peterson, which is an interesting one, which isn't going to Ala Moana unwise due to predicted sea level rise, flooding in that area in the near future. Climate change is real and it will affect Hawaii in very significant ways. This is something, obviously, when you invest this kind of money, you want it to last for a long time. So how are you taking those issues into account when you plan the route?
Right. So that was one thing I did ask our planning department. I said, do you folks have a sustainability sea level rise document, a planning document that you've looked into this? Because like I said, on the wastewater side, our infrastructure is all on the ground. So we have to design to that. But you can't possibly afford to harden or take care of our infrastructure immediately. It has to be on a piecemeal basis, unfortunately, because of the amount of money that is needed to protect the infrastructure. And for rail, one good thing is it's elevated, and as the shafts are being put in, I understand all of this has been taken into account, but that is something we need to continually look at.
We know that you, of course, have been on the job for 2 months. You are the interim CEO. Is this something that you would like to see become a permanent position for yourself? Do you see yourself in this role, and would you want to become the full-time CEO if given the opportunity?
Oh, yes, definitely. I do know I'm interim and I have a lot to prove to many different stakeholders. There was a lot of concern and still a lot of concern, and it's valid because I don't have transportation experience. My expertise or my experience actually is in construction. My COO, he's the finance. And when we're meeting with FTA and they have a project management oversight consultant, we meet with them monthly and we hear it loud and clear. The feedback is the two of us have 2 of the 3 legged stool expertise. We need a transit person to help. So we're putting together a steering committee with different expertise and putting transit people on that steering committee to help guide me, because I do need that help. But as I mentioned in one of my initial interviews, is I have to prove myself, and I hope I do in the short time period that I've been given. And I do hope that the board members give me the opportunity to become permanent.
You mentioned at the top that you yourself were a critic of this project early on. Now that you're obviously in it and you know more than any of us, what are some of the myths about this project? What do you wish the public understood that you understand now that you've become, gone sort of 180 and now have become the chief advocate, if you will, for this project?
I think I was sold already when I first became the E&B director and seeing the traffic that these people have to deal with. It's about 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. And it's not just transportation. It is transforming our communities, TOD, right? As we're talking to the developers, how can you fit our stations into your proposed development? Can we have the station come into your building? Can we have restaurants? Can we have affordable housing around our stations? I think it's just going to transform our community. And now that I'm in the position, I have different CEOs reaching out to me across the nation, and they said, I'm trying to remember what city it was. I don't know if it was Boston, but they said the community absolutely did not support rail. But once they saw how it transformed their community, brought it up, elevated it so that it's not run down and it's thriving and it's exciting, that now they're asking, when are you going to extend it to my community? And so that's what I want people to understand. And I've definitely changed. Like I said, this is something that our community needs, not just for transportation, but everything else that's involved around the rail system.
You know, as our time wraps up here, obviously this is a project that a lot of people are skeptical about. You know, we see it and we hear it in our community, and even in the comment section here throughout the broadcast, with many people just that they don't have a lot of trust in this program.
Yes.
It's over budget. It has taken long. We're talking an additional 10 more years. How do you build that trust back with the community? I mean, I know that you've only been in here again for 2 months. It's a tall order to ask of you to just come into this with the position that the rails are right now. But how do you build that trust back with the community when there's so many people who are skeptical of just the project as a whole because of the history of it?
You know, and people have a right to be skeptical and not trust HART. It's a tall order for our new team to overcome. And all I can do is day by day show people how we're a different administration. I hope my track record, if people understand who I am and where I came from, E&B, as I mentioned, has a massive capital program. It's $5 billion in itself. And all of the projects we had to do for our consent decree was on time, on budget. And so that's what I'm trying to bring to HART. This project should have been done January of 2020, according to our full funding grant agreement with FTA. And I can't go back in time. I can't make us on budget, on schedule back then, but I can try and be more prudent going forward. As far as trying to gain the trust of people, on the first day here on the job, we had an all hands meeting. There's about 100 people on the Zoom call. And it was my leadership style. I am firm and fair. I expect honesty, transparency, integrity, and that's how we're going to treat things internally and externally. We will not lie. Good, bad, or ugly, this is it. We have to be honest with the public, with the stakeholders, and take our hits. Like I said, I've been pretty open that we're at a $3 billion the gap. I don't have the answers of how we're going to fix it. I've never had this problem. When I was being interviewed by the board members, said I've never had a funding problem because at E&V we had the funds to do our projects and we stayed within budget. So this is new for me. So I'm asking for any kind of out of the box ideas on how to fill that gap. We have some tools that I mentioned earlier, but I think it's just day by day. If people can see by our actions. I have a stack of invoices here on my desk, and I know the contractors are screaming at me, but I go through every single invoice that comes across my desk. I don't just rubber stamp. I'm sending them back and questioning staff. Multiple reasons for doing that, so I can learn the project much quicker. Where's our money going? Why are we doing this? We've changed the process on change orders. All change orders need to be pre-approved by me before we even go down that route, because I want to know, does this have merit or not? Are we going to do this change order? Is it something nice to have or something critical that we have to do? So I'm trying to change the culture within, and I'm hoping that people start to see that I'm trying to do what's right for the taxpayers. That's what's always been what's leading me in my career. I have 15 years with the city, and that's what I intend to do. And that's what I said in my all hands meeting too. When you make decisions for this project, it's always what's in the best interest of the taxpayers, not yourself, not any other entity, what's in the best interest of the taxpayers.
Financial accountability and some transparency, those are things that I think the public definitely appreciates, and we appreciate you spending that full half hour with us this morning. Thank you so much, Lori Kahikina, the interim CEO of the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Aloha.
Wow, Ryan, very interesting to hear there. 2031, if we get to Ala Moana Center. But before then, she said we could see, they could turn over the keys, so to speak, by the end of this year to go to the stadium. Yeah,
but as she mentioned, there is some debate over that, if it will be a train to nowhere with the stadium now, as we know, its current state of where it's at. And so there will be some discussion that had to be had on the city level with the mayor. But she is saying that they are really trying to target that deadline and handing the keys, so to speak, over to the city to decide how they want to operate it moving forward. If they want to begin at least that partial route and where it goes to. So we'll see what happens there. But a lot of information given, especially knowing and realizing the biggest challenge ahead in this new corridor as they head down Dillingham and heading towards Ala Moana. A lot of work that still remains to be done for this final phase of the rail.
Right, and that's such a strong financial corridor. There are a lot of small businesses in that area that will be impacted if they do that shift. Mauka, as she mentioned, I'm sure a lot of people are looking at those plans and wondering, am I a landowner? Am I going to be affected? And what happens next there? We see all your comments. Thank you so much for all that you had to say. We tried to get to as much as possible with her, but very upfront with her own criticisms of the project to start and sort of seeing that transformation. And we know that the traffic is untenable going to the west side, and that there are so many people who sit in there for hours, as she mentioned, and the kind of impact that has to their quality of life. So we will continue to monitor this project going forward. $3 billion though, Ryan, that's a lot of money, and hard to see where it comes from.
Yeah, and it could be another, again, 10 more years so we see that final completion. But it does seem like it will be sometime before we even begin to see columns in the ground in the urban core, as a lot of infrastructure work has still yet to be done and funding mechanisms have to be figured out. And so we continue to wait and see, but we could see the train moving to some degree. As she said, maybe weekend trips on the rail for those who want to come from the west side into town on the rail to some point into central Oahu. So we'll keep you posted as things happen, but glad that we could finally have that conversation with Lori Kahikina from HART, and thank her for being on our show here this morning.
Yeah, she's a very busy woman, so a half an hour really does mean a lot, so mahalo for that. On Friday, we're going to be talking to Kauai Mayor Derek Kawakami. Kauai has decided to rejoin the Safe Travels program. We understand that on that island also Superintendent Dr. Christina Kishimoto is on here, so the majority of the teachers there have already been vaccinated. So we're going to get sort of an update on what life is like on that island and why he decided to make that change, what's happening with schools and sports and the rest. And I know a lot of business owners there were really pushing him to rejoin Safe Travels. So we'll be talking about all of that with him on Friday.
Yeah, and next week, another full lineup. We have the Director of the Labor and Industrial Relations, always a popular guest, and Pereira Stockwheel will be joining us. We'll also be tackling not tackling, but focusing and spotlighting, I should say, the movie industry, Finding Ohana, which was a Netflix show movie that was filmed here in the islands, proven to be a very successful film. We'll be talking to some of the actors, the local actors that were in that show, and getting their thoughts about the industry here in Hawaii. We'll also be talking to Mayor Rick Brangiardi as well. So a lot of guests coming up in the next few episodes of Spotlight Hawaii.
Yeah, definitely going to be asking the mayor what he thinks about when rail should start to be ridden on. So we'll be talking to him about that next Friday. But until then, please join us this Friday. Derek Kawakami, as we mentioned, will be here 10:30, and we hope to see all of you then.
Aloha.